So, if you're thinking of forelinking your Escort, you've probably done enough research online to see what's available. If you haven't, you perhaps should. I spent thousands of hours trawling through every forum, looking for information, going on Google, forelinking Escort, and there's loads of nice pictures of work that people have done, but there's very little in the way of instruction on how to do that work. There's a few pictures that regularly pop up. There's this one, which talks about using straight boxes, I think, and where it goes. There's this picture here, which is also pretty handy. I've used this one. There is this one. This is more to do with the Watts linkage, which we'll talk about later on. But the most important picture I found was one from a company called Gartrack. This one. And this one is important because Gartrack are the people that used to build these cars to start with. Just give you a little preview. This is their website here. You can see what they do, metal fabrication. But the company, you can see this is the history that Gartrack has with these Escorts. They were the ones that were originally building these Ford Escorts for Ford back in the late 70s and 80s. And their pedigree is second to none. They built all the best cars. So the fact that their name appears on some scrap piece of paper on the internet makes me wonder, is this probably the most accurate piece of information you're going to get? And I think it is. This is what I've gone with. Basically, it talks about using a two-piece box. You can't really see that in the picture very well, but this kind of body box section here is square in the chassis, has a tube coming through the chassis rail that allows a bolt to pass through that tube and secure the body box, adds some rigidity and length to this section here to hold it within the body, because essentially it's only going to be welded around here to the floor pan, which is 1mm steel, and it's just not very strong. But this box is square, and then the link box covers themselves, they taper in slightly. You can see that here because the centers around the seat stay area are 778, and the centers on the back wall here where the dampers normally mount into, it's like a plinth there, the centers on that section there are 762. So you can see there's a bit of a difference, and that difference is to allow the axle to move. If you can imagine that this is the axle with the diff cover here, the center of the axle. Basically, if the axle moves up and down both ends equally, then you'll see that everything stays parallel. However, suspension generally works by one wheel moving up independent of the other, but with a live axle, obviously they can't move independently. So if this side goes up, this side would kind of go down. But what's happening is, if you've got a Watts linkage attached and it's preventing any kind of lateral movement of the axle, the only way this axle can move is kind of in a circular motion. So as this end comes up, it's going to scribe an arc slightly to the right. Conversely, this side, when this side comes up, it's going to scribe an arc slightly to the left. But you can imagine if the arc comes up to here, same on this side comes up to here, the distance between these 2 points is going to be slightly less than it would be at the end of the boxes here, which is the reason, I think, I'm not 100% sure, somebody may correct me on this, but I think that's the reason why these boxes taper in slightly. So this basically is the setup I've gone for. I've gone with 778 centers at the seat stay end, and I've gone with 762 centers at the shock mounting, or the damper mounting box. I don't really know what it's called. But as for the kits themselves, I get most of my stuff from here, Motorsport Tools. There's various kits. See here, these are straight boxes. And basically this doesn't allow any kind of tapering in from the body box. I don't really know how you'd fit them. I don't know if you'd fit them at an angle or if you just put them in straight and hope for the best. I don't know. But this is the one I went with here. This is a two-piece box set, and this is the work spec. Because basically you have the body box here, this section, which gets fitted, you'll see that, gets fitted square in the car, and then the covers themselves you can taper in slightly. So that's where the journey starts. mainly with this picture for the distances, but on top of this you also need to know how far down in the chassis this box goes. So I've kind of gone between the two pictures just to be clear, because this picture I couldn't really see any reference to how far the box sits below the surface of the floor, whereas this one is quoting a 1 inch distance from the lower mounting hole to the top of the floor pan, or below the floor pan basically. So I've gone with this setup. I've put the box, which is very similar to this, up against the seat stay, and the hole is 1 inch below the floor pan. Now this isn't by no means a how-to video. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. This is the first kit I've ever done. All I'm doing is just putting this information out there for you to have a look at, to see how I did it, and if you think it's a good way of doing it, you can copy by all means, and if you think it was the most hideous way of doing it, then that's fine also. But on a side note, with following these instructions, since putting the axle in, I've put the axle up at full ride height with one wheel, full ride height with the other wheel, full ride height axle touching the boot floor with both wheels up, and I don't have any fouling of the link boxes on the rods, on the link bars themselves. So everything seems to work really well. But the caveat to all this is the axle. Say this is the axle here, it's the brackets on the axle. Now if you already have an axle with brackets on, you might want to measure the distance between these brackets and think about where you put these boxes and where you put these link boxes and the covers. If you're having an axle made up after you've done the work, then it's imperative you speak to your axle builder, basically to make sure that these brackets are in the right place, the centers, the same centers that you have basically on your boxes here. Otherwise the whole thing's not going to line up and it's going to be a disaster. But yeah, this is where you pick me up now. We'll jump into the fabrication, and you can see how it goes. Here we are in the garage. Today we're going to start installing a link kit on a Mark II Escort. Absolutely no idea how to do this. I have very primitive instructions off the internet. This diagram here is commonly available, and down here we have the link kit itself. This is a two-piece works link kit with the body brackets. There is also some covers to go over the link arms, and as you can see, the car itself has no work done to it at the moment at all, apart from some datum points that I've measured out, which we'll talk about very shortly. So in the kit, we've got the link arms themselves, the bushes I pressed in yesterday, we have the two body boxes, and we have this 8mm threaded bar at the moment, which I've spaced out with some nuts just to give roughly or pretty much the distance I need from the center of the boxes. Now these distances, depending on where you look on the internet, will vary. I'm not entirely sure what is correct and what's not, hence this video, because I'm going to do it this way and then we're going to see how it works out. So on with the build. We've got the body boxes, as you can see on the floor. They're 46mm wide, half of that is obviously 23. We've got the two body boxes. I'm going with 780 centers or 778 centers. The original diagram here is 31.5 inch. Other diagrams I've had off the internet are saying around 780, so I'm going to go with the 780 centers initially, and just to see how we go. So basically 220 off each side wall. We've got the edge of the link box itself 46mm, and then the 780 from the centers. So from this edge to the other side of the edge we're looking at 734mm. Also what I've done is measured from the rear damper mounting holes basically to the edges, just to try and triangulate everything as best we can, and just to see what kind of distances we're getting, and everything seems to line up. And basically what that looks like is this. So this is basically where one of the boxes is going to go in. Going to drill or grind down into the actual flange piece to mount the body box flush with the seat stay. Got 220mm to the side wall. 365 is from this line here, the edge of the link box, to the center datum of the car, and then going towards the other side, same story, 365 and then 220 from the sidewall, and then measured from the anti-roll bar, the damper hole all the way to this furthest edge is 965. So that's what we're going to go with. I'm going to start making the cuts very shortly, which you'll see. But just to have a look at the link boxes themselves, 46mm, and basically this rod now is separating this center datum and this center datum by 780mm, which was 734mm between the boxes. They're going to mount in that way with the 3 holes at the top, the 1 hole at the bottom, and yeah, we'll see how we go in the next couple of minutes. So here we go, first cut, PPE, defender, ears, gloves, here we go. So there we go, first cut. Let's see if the link box fits. Perfect. So now what we need to do is figure out how we're going to drill the floor. That's for the next step. There's no real easy way of doing this. I've tried to approach it in different angles. I think the easiest way is to cut it from underneath. The only problem is I don't really know where to cut underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill some holes at the 2 corners initially, and then maybe close to the seat bulkhead as well, and then just have a look, see what it looks like underneath. What's going on here? I'm not sure if it's gone well or if it's gone really bad just yet, but there's a few things that are highlighted here which maybe you need to be aware of. The first thing is the cut there at 46mm obviously didn't take into consideration the extra strengthening gusset plate welded on, so this needs to be widened up now to accept that to go further down, and also to get these flanges through the floor involves opening up the gap quite a lot more than I originally thought was needed. I think the easiest way of doing that is doing what I've done here. It's kind of cutting the floor and folding it back, not taking the metal out, so then you can fold it back and weld it with the body box. So I'm just going to take these out a little bit, try and get the box to sit below the floor a little bit more. We'll see how we go. Now the next problem is, once the box is through the floor, we need to decide how far through the floor it needs to appear. Now from what I've read, that's about 1 inch below the chassis floor. Now the chassis floor normally mounts to the top flange of the chassis rail, so I guess from the chassis rail we'll use that as our measuring point for 1 inch. Now where that hole lines up is quite difficult. I read that if you get a bolt, I don't have one so I've used a bit of Rhode, sharpened her off, keeping the body box flush with the seat stay inside, putting the bolt through, and then marking on the chassis rail. You have basically your datum point now. Going through here now. As you can see, but we have our mark on the rail. So we'll measure down from that for 1 inch, and then we'll think about drilling a hole around that datum mark. So a few hours have passed. I've got one of the body boxes in on the driver's side, the body box on the passenger side is coming in, and the one on the right hand side is a lot better than the one on the left hand side. That's mainly because the first time round I wasn't entirely sure what was going on, and the second time you always do things a little bit better. So this is the first monstrous hole here on the left side, driver's side obviously, and the passenger side. The gap in the floor is exactly 46mm wide, and that gives the centres of 778. This side the floor was a little bit rotten around the bottom of the seat stay, so that's going to have to be patched up as well, so I'm not too concerned of how it looks just yet. That side the floor is solid and it's just peeled back nicely, so when the box goes in we can fold the floor down and fine. Okay, as for hole situation, the one hole, our datum here, we dropped the box 1 inch down from the floor, we measured it, we drilled it. Now to find the hole on the opposite side, what I should have done really is left it initially, put the hole in on that side, put this bar through the 2 holes, and then plumb down from this onto either the floor or a piece of paper to basically then find out where our center should be for the outside hole. I didn't do that, I just kind of measured kind of off the bracket and off the floor and various datums just to try and make a well-educated guess, and as you can see it's gone horribly wrong. The bar, this bar, go through the chassis rail, but as you can see it's not pointing anywhere near where it needs to be on the opposite chassis rail. So I've made this ingenious device initially to help me. So today we're going to drill the hole for the chassis rail on the passenger side. Been to get some tubing today for the bolt that's going to go through the chassis rail and up against the link box itself. So that tube needs to be cut and put through the chassis rail at some point, but first things first, drilling the hole through the chassis rail over here, and then to get this bar through nice so all the holes line up. Okay, a few hours in and I have the link boxes in, the body boxes, they're flush with the seat stay, they're 1 inch below the floor pan, and there's a rod that runs through the chassis rails, through both link boxes into the other chassis rail. I've also put a tube through the anti-roll bar mounts. Distance I believe from the anti-roll marks should have been 422mm or 16.5/8 from the anti-roll bar mount to the centre of the link box, bottom arm. So what we've got here, basically I've put these bars in here now just to basically square everything off, make sure the distance at the top is correct, make sure it's square. These are square within the boxes are square within the body. Both boxes are sticking out top of the seat member by 69mm. They're both 220 from the sidewall, they're exactly 365 from the edge of the box to the centre datum, same the other side. So that's all square in the car. Underneath, we have the bottom of both link boxes, one here, tube goes through the holes, through the chassis rails. This hole was the problem hole before. I just had to elongate it a little bit, but that's going to have to be drilled out for a bigger tube to go through there anyway. So that's that. They're exactly 1 inch below the floor pan all the way through, and that's the other side. And that's the bar for the anti-roll bar, and the distance, as I say, 422 from the centre of this hole to the centre of there. So that's where we're at now. Everything's in, everything's square, everything's checked. I've got the tube in this side. This is just a support bar for now, obviously, just to line everything up. And I've got the tube in the bottom. So this is all ready to be welded up now. We're just going to put the link boxes in, put it all back together again, and then get all these set up finally and welded in. But obviously this is very rusty underneath. It's been bare for a while now. It's taken a bit longer than I was hoping for. So I'm just going to blast all this back with the wire wheel now, and once it's all clean, we'll put all the link boxes back in and start welding her up. So a little bit of messing around, but the link boxes are in, the connecting tubes are in, everything's kind of tacked at the moment. Just done a couple of welds, top and bottom, just to make sure it doesn't move. But still a lot of work regarding fitting the floor around the boxes, especially on the driver's side, which was quite a big hole. But this is what it looks like. So we've got the one box welded in at the moment on the 6th passenger side. Same story. The floor around that side is a lot neater. This side needs bending back down, and maybe kind of a gap fillet putting in there. Underneath we have the bracket, the sporting tube, the bolt runs all the way through. The end of the tube did come out quite a bit, but I just kind of flushed that back just for a level surface with the washer. And everything's in, everything's square, the distances are all the same, so everything's good. Next steps, patching up the floor, marking out where the holes are going to go for the covers themselves, and then the support that comes across here for the top of the link boxes. Let's see how we get on with that. Fit the passenger side link box at the rear. This is what it looks like at the moment. We have the body bracket inside, and I've laid on some tape, which is I think 52mm, which is exactly the same width as the link box, just to give me a kind of a rough guide. I'm not going to cut to this line. I'm going to cut slightly inside so I can fold the metal out to make a nice fit on the link box itself, or the cover. We'll see how we go. Tape drawn around just to give me roughly the width of the link box. Now we're just going to measure to make sure that's all correct. Right, this is the lines. I've drawn a cut line about 7 or 8mm in from the width line. We're going to cut to that, and then we can bend out a flange of around 7 or 8mm, maybe 10mm in places, and then we'll see how the box fits. So the cut is made to the cut line, just inside the width line, and now we're just going to bend the ends out, see what happens. Width hole cut, ready for the box. Let's see if it fits. The box in the hole, centers line up, and I've put the support gusset on with the flange just over the top. It all lines up nicely. You can see in there. So now we're just going to clean it all up and weld her in.